My name is Rosalind Benjet. Today is June 11th, 2011. We are at the home of Edith Baker today. Our videographer is Leslie Wagner. And Edith has been involved in many different activities in Dallas for a long time. And we're going to start, and Edith, tell us about your family. You were not born in the United States. You came from Bulgaria, right?
That's right. That's right. I'm a Bulgarian Sephardic Jew. And my family had been in Bulgaria for centuries. So it's after the Inquisition, that's where the family settled, in Bulgaria, in a small community of Samkov, which is today not a very important town, but it was when they arrived. My father, I'm not sure that, he was also there. My father died when I was 5 years old, and I'm 88. So some time ago, I can't figure it out. But they arrived in this little town in Bulgaria and started business, which was very well accepted by the community. Bulgaria was still under the Ottoman Empire. Mm-hmm. So that was in the 1800s. And when they were expelled from Spain, they landed in Austria. And Austria expelled them as well. So that's how they landed in Bulgaria. So it's a long history in a nutshell.
Yes.
But mainly is that all of my grandparents and great-grandparents were born in Bulgaria. So there was just, they all came eventually from Spain.
From Spain.
So
both your mother's family and
right,
your father's
and my
family.
father's, yeah. And the Ladino language, which is Judeo-Espanol, mm-hmm. or Ladino as some call it, was spoken in the house. So I spoke Spanish from the time I was a little child, as well as French, which was spoken very often at home, and Bulgarian, which was the national language. So I don't know how far you want me to go with this, but
you said your father died when you were 5 years old.
When I was 5 years old, yes. They moved to Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria, after the Ottoman Empire was almost gone.
Which would have been about 1917, I think? No?
A little earlier.
Earlier.
Yeah, quite a bit earlier, actually. I was born in 1923, and but the Ottoman Empire left a lot of mementos as far as architecture and buildings and religion and whatnot. We had a relatively calm life. I was a child, and of course you don't know exactly the political structure in that early age. The Jews were usually left pretty much on their own, except they could not be part of parliament or government. But they were allowed to have anything professionally or whatever. My family was in the cosmetics business, and when they moved to Sofia, they established 3 branches. One was in Sofia, Bulgaria, one was in Paris, France, and one was in Bucharest, Romania. Mm-hmm. So there were 4 brothers, and 2 of them were outside of Bulgaria, and remained there for quite a while with their businesses. And of course, the interruption of all this happened when the Second World War just broke out. I graduated from an American college, which was a college which existed in several East European cities. And it was opened by the Baptist Church somehow, and there was never religion involved in it whatsoever, just totally secular and very, very...
So you learned English there?
At college, yes. And that was one of the languages I did not know. But I spoke French fluently and German because I had a German governess as well, and Spanish from home, and Bulgarian, of course. And then in our college was similar to junior college in the States. I mean, that's the only comparison that I can really actually establish, is that at the age of 14, I went to the American college, which was as a, what do you call it, children who were sent to a boarding house. I mean, it's not a boarding school.
Yeah.
And it was a very, very special school, very excellent school. And my parents wanted me to go there. And since a lot of my friends went there, I did too, at a very early age, which was not easy. Mm-hmm. So I really had time to develop a relationship with family, much because I was away most of the time. So, and as far as the family is concerned, you know, as I said, you jump in when you want to hear something.
What was your family's participation in Jewish affairs when you were a child? Did they have any?
Actually, the town in which they arrived, they built a synagogue, which today is a museum, because of the very interesting architecture, and they built several buildings in the same architecture, which was probably one of the oldest, you know, in that part of the world. And they were their fame was very international in those days. But after the Ottoman Empire and everything, and they resettled in Sofia, things were slightly different. It took some time for them to develop all this, and eventually they did. And my father married my mother, who was also a Sephardic Jew, with more sort of a Turkish background. But she never spoke Turkish. She just spoke Bulgarian and French and Spanish, like all of us. And she was 18 years old. And in the time, you didn't have a choice for schools. So she went to a school where there were nuns. So, and my cousins, so the children of my father's and his brother's children, were all educated in France with chemical engineering, because of the business that they were in.
And do you have siblings?
I had a brother died about 7 years ago who lives in Portugal. He was married to Portuguese, and so I have a wonderful family there in Lisbon. But unfortunately, at my age, I just don't feel like traveling a lot, so it's a little difficult to see them often. So I was there when I was 85, the whole family went there, my children and my grandchild and everything. And so we spent some time there with them. And then I had a sister who was born before I was. In fact, I was born the year she died. She was only 4 years old at the time for meningitis. And just a few years later, my father died. So it was really my brother, my mother, and me. But he was getting older, so he had to go to study in a French school in France. And since my uncle was there, it felt like that was the right thing to do. So truly, we hardly knew each other. Then when he returned, I went to college. So it was one of those things. As far as the Jewish life, it was Orthodox. I did not know what Orthodox was because there was nothing else to compare it to. There was one synagogue, a beautiful synagogue, which was restored recently. And the Bulgarian government was very attentive to that and wanted to make sure that it was restored exactly as it was. One of my uncles was a Kabbalah student and strictly kosher. The house, that was his house. In my house, there was no such thing because there was no father. So my mother was not prepared for anything like that. She was very young. She was a widow at the age of 32. But the Jewish life continued. We had many, we celebrated all our holidays, just as any of the Ashkenazi Jews did, in a different fashion, in different foods. That was the only difference. But otherwise, we knew who we were. We were Jews, and there was the usual discrimination. Not very overt, but it was there. And so it was interesting to see the evolution of what happened during those years, just before the war and after the war.
Bulgaria, if I'm not mistaken, is one of the few communities where Jews emerged fairly unscathed during the war.
That's right. That's right.
What happened?
Well, this was one of the small, unheard of miracles that happened in Eastern Europe, and nobody ever talked about it. I think I started here in Dallas, eventually bringing up the facts. I was invited to several talks, at the JCC and at SNU and at Temple and whatnot. So I brought the subject to the fact that this is really a story which was, for whatever reason, was not explored, considering the fact that so few Jews from Eastern European or any other country survived. There were 50,000 Jews and 45,000 survived. The 5,000 were also alive, but they were communists. So they fit into the new regime. Right. And the 45,000 Jews who were there, who survived after the intervention of government and the church in Bulgaria, which fought on behalf of their brethren and managed to send us to the provinces so that we would not be in the German communist phase. Bulgaria was a partner in the Axis of the Nazis, which was sort of like a protective move, because otherwise they would have just come right over and
Taken them all.
Take them over, just like the Ottomans did, So they became I think I lost my train of thought. The Bulgarian government, as I said, the church and the government really fought hard and allowed us to be the last minute interjection or interaction with the government and the church while we were on the trains on our way. We stayed 3 days in the trains, And then we were allowed, the trains took off again, and we were allowed to get off wherever we wanted, which was such a shock because we just didn't know what was happening. We had no idea about Auschwitz or anything, mind you. But those days were not, that subject was not something that people knew about. And it was very well hidden. And so all we knew that we saw some of the Jews from Thrace and Macedonia. There were about 15,000 of them who were sent to Auschwitz and Birkenau. And that was, the Bulgarian government did not interfere with the newly attained lands. That was like,
Right.
It was not part of Bulgaria.
But only their citizens.
That's right, their citizens. And there's a big sort of a discussion about the fact that everybody's lauding Bulgaria, and yet they allowed 15,000 of their Jews to die, which I totally refuse to accept, because if we were 65,000 Jews and only 15,000 died, there were still 50,000 who remained
That's
alive.
right. That's a lot of people.
So it's a lot of people. And Bulgaria was not a saint in any way. Bulgaria had the same anti-Semitic rules as any place else. It was not exactly like in Germany or any of the others, but we felt it. We were moved, around an awful lot. We were not to stay in our homes, but we had to move into areas where Jews were more accepted than where we were. So that was, the elite was not allowed to remain where they lived. So we were a pretty prominent family, so it was just an immediate reaction that we had to move.
So you moved around different places during the war years?
Mostly within the city, but in different homes. Different homes. And wound up eventually living in the factory, which we had, which had, beside the factory, sort of like an apartment. So we were able to live there for a little while before some personal tragedies occurred. One of my uncles and my cousins were hanged as an example of the bourgeoisie, and also because of black marketeering, which of course they never would do with the Germans, but that's what they were. That's why they were as an example for the rest of the population. And after that, we started, as I said, going through all of the little communities wherever there were very, very few Jews and no Nazis. So we were allowed to live there, but with nothing. In other words, we went totally without any assets. All of our assets were taken by the Bulgarian government and the Germans.
And what happened after the war?
Well, that was probably one of the also more interesting things that was never mentioned in any history. And having been part of that, I've been very intent in giving the information about that period. We returned to our city of birth, not our homes or anything. We didn't have any, so we had, and with nothing, so we had to search somebody who would take us in and eventually find a way to pay them for it. And there were some Jews who had places which were not destroyed completely during the war. bombardment and whatnot when the Americans bombarded, the Germans. Bulgaria was affected in that respect. So we returned, and the freedom was intoxicating. I mean, after all these years. And so, as I tell everybody, it was the best of times and the worst of times. We just had just to be able to breathe again, which didn't last long, because then Eastern Europe was divided. The Americans took west and the Russians took the east. So there we were under another dictatorship, which was almost as bad, except not just for the Jews, but for everybody, except those who were communists. And so the communist regime began immediately their tactics for conversion, if you will. I mean, there was to be a communist was almost a priority for the communists with everybody, but especially with the more, the better known and the more affluent Jewish people. They were given their money back from the bank to restore the properties that we lost. And as soon as we restored it, they nationalized. So that was the end. I mean, they used the money for us to fix it, and then they nationalized everything. So there we were again with nothing. And at that point in time, I knew that I had to find something to. And I had a very influential uncle who found me a position, because there were communist camps for Jews and non-Jews who were not accepting communism, they were not working or whatever. So I found this job through my uncle with the American Joint Distribution Committee, the JDC. And I was an interpreter there and a secretary because of my English from college. I was not paid, but I was glad to have a job. And that's where my husband was sent from Paris, the central office for the JDC, to Sofia to help in the resettlement of the Jews to Israel. So that was 1947, I think it's when the office opened there. And in 1948, I was already part of the JDC, and I worked under two other directors before that, before Fred Baker was sent in, and my former director by the name of Henry Levy and his wife were the directors, and when they were leaving, she just said, "There's a new young man coming here, Fred Baker, you better marry him." And I said, how easy and how nice that sounds. Who is he? What is he? He says, "You'll see." So anyway, Fred Baker came, and he's a charmer. And as I tell everybody, he chased me around the desk until I caught him. And that part of the Joint Distribution Committee is totally omitted from any history. And I've read every book on Bulgarian history and the Jewish involvement and whatnot. Never was it mentioned that the Joint Distribution Committee paid per head for all of us
to go to Israel?
To go to Israel during settle.
Did many of the people go to Israel?
45,000
Most.
went. And the 5,000 who were either too old or they were communists in their beliefs. They remained, and unfortunately, the beautiful little country was under communist regime for over 50 years. I kept in touch with some of my classmates from college who were non-Jewish. And so I knew a little bit of what was happening, but very, very underhand. Nothing was, nothing was clear. It was all understated. So I was able to send some money and some things through people who would come here and then return from Bulgaria, who were also communists, but kind enough to know that, these were friends and I wanted to help them.
Now, were you married in Bulgaria?
No. Actually, Fred was in charge of the aliyahs, the aliyot, that just left Bulgaria in 1948. He made sure that I left on the first aliyah. And I had only known him for about 4 months. But we already had a sort of unspoken agreement that, we were going to marry and he was going to come to Israel. So, and he did. A year later after he finished.
Did your mother and brother go to Israel?
Yes, yes. My mother and my brother was in the Haganah. He went underground when he was still in Bulgaria. There was a way to get there. And so he went. And then when we came, he was still a soldier there, but he brought a few shekels, which were very helpful since we didn't have anything. However, we were lucky because we had family there. My mother's side of family, 2 of her sisters left Bulgaria way before anything like that happened, way before the war, and settled in Israel. So we were lucky enough to have a home there when we arrived, rather than still be in a camp, which was a free camp for Jews in Israel, but still it was a camp. So we were there, and a year later, Fred had finished all of his duties in Bulgaria, so he came to Israel, and we got married there. He still says he doesn't quite know whether it was legitimate or not, because it was in Ladino and not in. So, but he says he had the ambassador, the American ambassador in Haifa, to come and be a witness. So he believed it eventually. And that's our life. We didn't stay in Israel because Fred wanted to return to the States. So we took a long honeymoon because I didn't have a visa. I had to wait for the visa. Waited in the best places in the world, in Paris and in Florence, which was very nice. We had a good honeymoon, and then the reality hit me when I came to this country, and here I was alone and very, very lonely. And it was a rough time. That's why I say any immigrant who comes into a place where there's nobody of their ilk,
yes,
is another survivor eventually, because it is very difficult. It's totally inexplicable. It's not something you can tell somebody this is how it felt. You just felt this break, this torn thread, of your life. That is totally and completely isolated at the beginning. And of course, I had a husband who I only knew for 3 or 4 months. So, that was a new family that I had to get into and get
where
to
was
know.
his family from?
Chicago. And so Chicago was, for me, almost any city that I landed in to live, I'm sure would have been the same. I hated Chicago. I hated it because I was so lonely. The telephones and nothing. To make a long story shorter, I had to start work. I just had to do something. I just could not live in my in-laws' home. And while Fred was going to school, because he was taking his second master's. He already had taken one at the London School of Economics. And then he went to the University of Chicago and took his master's in social work administration. So that took 2 years. So I lived in Chicago 2 years, which it's cold.
It's cold, I know.
In every way for me. It's a beautiful city. I'm just sorry. I really felt so alone there that I didn't get into the, intelligentsia or into the, knowing the people who, and the arts and whatnot. Nothing. I was just involved in one thing, working. And I worked at Saks Fifth Avenue for about 2 years.
And were you always interested in art?
Yes. Always was. Since I was a child, I was drawing. Nobody paid much attention to that. I mean, it was just like a normal thing. I would just take a magazine and start drawing. But I didn't really take it in full force or strength or whatnot until I arrived in Chicago, because I wanted to just to forget where I was and what I was doing. So I joined the Chicago Art Institute, and just for the evening classes from work, I went straight there, and I started sculpture and whatnot. And so I spent a year doing that. And then one day Fred notified me that he had gotten a job in Dallas, Texas. And that was the second shocker, third shocker, fourth, fifth. And I said, now where's Texas? So he, of course, laughed. But then whenever I spoke to people, said, oh, you love it, the Cowboys and Neiman Marcus is there. and I swear to you, that's exactly what I found. Not so much the Cowboys, but Neiman Marcus was a good reference. And so I loved Dallas almost immediately. There was something that the warmth of the people and the neighborhoods, and somehow it was warm. It was hot. After the freezing weather in Chicago, it was warm and no air conditioning. I mean,
What year did you run in Dallas?
Dallas was 1951, so I've been here since.
And what was Dallas like then?
A little big town. Small as can be in terms of activities and culture and whatnot. Large in space, huge, enormous, I think the Central Expressway stopped at the Walnut Hill Lane. So you can imagine how much it grew since then. And
yes.
Of course, I was immediately involved with the museum. I went to the museum and started taking classes in sculpture and painting and whatnot. And in the meantime, my mother was living with my brother in Portugal. It was probably so much more difficult for older people to go through such a transition as, my mother and so many of her age people were, just to land in a place not knowing what they were going to be doing and how to survive. So it was, there was nothing easy about our lives. It was a very complex, and even though I think the only reason of a healthy survival is that you're young. What happened with all the people who arrived in Israel, which was really the Bulgarian population in its entirety, and all those young people were able to get an education. They were the healthiest immigrants
because they were not in
yes,
camps.
they were not in camps, and Israel just accepted them with a lot of very, very important people in Israel were Bulgarian, like Moshe Dayan and some others, who, the wife of Ben Gurion, I believe it was Ben Gurion, I'm not sure it was Bulgarian. So a lot of, they established a very healthy life in Israel, and till today, I still have some cousins who are much younger, of course, because there's nobody from my generation who's left, who's alive, anywhere throughout the world. So I'm really the only REA, so to speak, baker. REA, not baker, because there are a lot of bakers still alive. But from my family, there's no one left except a few great grand cousins or something like that in Israel. And so I don't know
What was the Jewish community like in Dallas when you first came?
It was the first thing we did. Fred and I, of course, went to the synagogue. And our synagogue, Temple Emmanuel, was in South Dallas at the time. And I met most of my friends right there at Temple and had a wonderful community of friends when I became very, very friendly with, and those friends remained friends until most of them are dead. So we had a very good Jewish life in terms of involvement in Temple. I was program director for the programs at Temple, and then I was given Shawn Mayer, who was the wife of Mr. Mayer, who was the architect of Temple Emmanuel. She knew that I was interested in art, and she wondered if I would give a course in art appreciation at Temple, which I did, and which was probably the most important thing that happened in my life at that time, because I didn't know I could do it, and I did. But that was nothing compared to the people I met. The most wonderful people who were the stars of Dallas, and they all became my friends. And we continued that course for 3 years. And that's when I learned to speak, because I just didn't know how I would communicate. But they had the best time, and I saw some of the most wonderful art collections in the world. At Pollock's and the Crossings, and those are all people who loved art and had the art in their homes. So for me, it was like the most fascinating era in my life, just meeting those wonderful women from Temple, with whom I became good friends and remained friends until their passing.
Where did you live?
When we first came to Dallas, we lived in an apartment on Boaz Street, which is where the Inwood Village is. Right behind it was little apartments. No air conditioning, no nothing. I gave birth to my son as a, Rosalind, the husband, doesn't exist anymore. And he was born in 1952 and the temperature was 107.
Oh,
And the hospital had no air conditioning. So that's my memory of the biggest event in my life. But we lived there for about 3 years, and then we built a house in East Dallas, which was a property that hadn't been populated at all. So there were just so few people but the old Schwangers lived there. So, I mean, close to us and some other people, but it was just like land of mud and just a few homes around there. And then the opportunity for Fred came to go to Paris with the American Jewish Committee. This is how we came to Dallas,
he
because
was working for the American Jewish Committee.
so we went to Paris and we lived there 2 years, and there's where my daughter was born. And life was wonderful because I had cousins, and my mother came to live with us. And so it was, from that viewpoint, it was the best time that I had, being back again with my family. And then, of course, when it was time to return to the States, when I was asked where I wanted to go, I said Dallas. I mean, I just had no doubt about that's where I wanted to live again. But we spent 2 years of good time, and with 2 small kids, not very easy, but it was okay. And so then we came back, and here we are.
And you resumed your friendships.
Absolutely. It was really the warmest welcome. It was as if we had never left. And many of them came to Paris, not for us, but whenever they would travel, they would look us up, like the Shannons and the Feldmans and whatnot. So they would come and look us up, and we spent some wonderful time with them, and many of our friends did that. And then we came back, and that was a time when I decided, right after Paris, we went to Portugal to stay with my brother for a little while, because I hadn't seen him and my sister-in-law and whatnot at all, except, for just a very short period of time. And my mother was there also, so I continued having my family around me, and I decided I love Portuguese marble. So I decided I was going to do something with marble when I came to Dallas. And I thought I was just going to make little tabletops and whatnot, but Fred and I just wrote the proposal and got some investors. And before we knew it, we had the Baker Marble Company, which amazingly enough, until 2 years ago, still called the Baker Marble Company on Maple Avenue. I started that organization. Fred was working someplace else, and I knew that I could not have 2 children and be full-time businesswoman and whatnot, and it was not an easy job. I mean, that is marble is something that is, there were only two marble companies in Texas. So he was the 3rd one, this little girl who knew nothing about business, But anyway, so that we...
So your business was importing the marble and...
Yes, we imported marble, and we had a man who did cutting and polishing of the marble and installation and whatnot. So I had installed a lot of marble in some of my future clients when I had the gallery. And whenever I told him, I said, Baker Marble, don't tell me that's you. So anyway, that was a nice interview. And then, of course, I started teaching, and after I taught, somebody asked me to open an art gallery, and I just started my life. And the gallery was a very respected, well-known gallery, and I was very involved with the art community, very involved, and started quite a few organizations like the Dallas Art Dealers Association, which was in 1985, and then another organization which helped it was called the Emergency EASL, Emergency Artist Support League. That was for artists who did not have insurance, they had their homes burned, and it didn't matter whether they were men, women, Jews, or non-Jews. So, I'm still involved with some of the organizations, but pretty much a retired lady.
But you also mentored many artists.
I did. I mentored many artists, and the largest part of my...
Call from Untitled Chapter.
You can wait.
I'll just
Call from Untitled Chapter.
let it ring. I'm not going to take it now.
Call from Untitled Chapter.
It's insistent.
Okay, that's it.
Okay.
Sorry about that. So I was talking about mentoring, yes. The largest group of friends I have now are my artists, because my generation is gone. I have hardly anybody who is still alive from the people I knew and were friends with, maybe 2 or 3 people, that's all. So I do have very loyal, wonderful artists, and I have art by each and every one of them, which I bought from them at the gallery. So it reminds me of them and in my life.
What were the criteria you used in choosing people that you chose?
Well, we started, interestingly enough, with I had 2 partners, Regine Ginsburg and Susie Morgan, and we started with prints, because there was no such thing in Dallas as a gallery that showed prints, original prints. Chagall and Murrow and Calder and whatnot, all these. And within a year, we were a success. But then, little by little, that business started sort of impregnating other galleries, and before I knew it, it was just not that good anymore. So I started representing Texas artists. I felt that there was enough art in Texas, enough artists in Texas to be represented. And so I started the gallery by inviting just people to send their resumes and slides, and little by little we chose a wonderful stable of artists who, some of them been with me for 30 years, some for 20, some for 15 or whatever, but a lot of artists went through our gallery, and when I closed the gallery, I placed all of them in other galleries. So nobody was left without having a home. And the mentoring, yes, I mean, people, my artists are my friends, and they ask for advice, and it's like I'm their mother, older sister, or mother, or whatever. And it's just giving advice and just giving them the courage and whatnot to continue with their work, whether it was good time for artists or bad, because it's not easy to be an artist. Artists just maybe this piece was selling for something like $5,000, you know. And people would say, now, how could something like that be just $5,000? Well, maybe that was the only piece she'd sell in 1 year. So that made like maybe $1 an hour.
Yeah.
When you think, you know, of what the possibilities are of selling a lot, but now some of these artists, of course, I had promoted heavily, so they sold well, and that's why they stayed.
Let's go back to your children growing up in Dallas. What was life like that for them in those days?
Jeff was at Hillcrest. Well, Jeff had a very a very interesting school life because we were in Paris when he was 4 years old, so he went to the international school in Paris, and he hated it. He hated everybody there. You know, there were people from all over, kids from all over, but he just hated it because they were not Americans. But then, without even knowing it, he learned French just by listening to the kids. And he was fluent in French, I mean, accent and everything, which was wonderful because he could play with kids, you know. There were not that many Americans there. And my daughter, Rennie, her name's Corinne, we decided to give her a French name. However, my son thought it was too long. So he said, oh, come on, Corinne, Rennie, Corinne, Rin-Tin-Tinny, you know, so whatever. So she became Rennie. So she is now 53. She has a daughter, my only grandchild. My son is a photographer, and a very successful one at one time.
He inherited Mama's heart?
He was, yes, the eye. I think that's what people just always, we have a European eye, and that may be so. I'm not aware of it, but he tells me that people will say that you have a different eye. It's not, it's more European than American. Raising them in Dallas, they never loved Dallas. That was what was so interesting with my children when they got a little bit older, of course. Until then they didn't know the difference, but they wanted us to move someplace else, which of course was totally impossible. But as many times as they left Dallas, they came back. It was always, this was home. Our friends were our surrogate families, and their children were friends of ours and theirs. And so it was a time when they were exploring the other possibilities. Jewish life was tough for them. Temple was not exactly a place where kids enjoyed their school. And it's a big difference from what it is now and what it used to be then. And that generation of kids, they all felt the same way. It was an imposition for them to go to Temple for Sunday school. But, you know, bar mitzvahs and confirmations, all this was done. Very strong feelings. I don't believe they have, and that's mainly my fault. Because since I was a child, I was hiding that I was Jewish, if I could. So I never just impressed that very much on them. And my husband, Fred, who was a Yiddish bacher, honestly, I mean, he went to yeshiva and everything. Just gave it up so completely that he became the total opposite within the years, you know. He and Rabbi Olin were friends because he was of his ilk. They were philosophers, teachers. But religion per se did not mean much to him. To me, religion is a very personal thing, and I can pray anywhere, anytime, and I don't feel that organized religion is my thing. I was never that involved from that viewpoint.
And what about your granddaughter? What's she doing today?
Well, that's a very interesting question about my granddaughter, who's really raised very much like that. I mean, she hated to go to Sunday school and everything, and her parents kept saying, and you know, Ruth Andrews, of course, that's Roger's mother and Renee's mother. Roger has a great feeling for everything Jewish, but not to the point of where, you know, you had to go to temple every Friday, or they lit candles once in a while. It was just like, and all the holidays, yes. My granddaughter went to ESD, Episcopal School of Dallas, which is a wonderful school. That's what they were looking for, the best school for education. She was the only Jewish child in her class. She is. And she went to chapel every day. And she was not comfortable with that. She knew very well that she was Jewish. I mean, that was, you know, something that was somehow ingrained. And so she never kneeled or anything. She was standing just like me. When I went to school, it was the same thing. I was the only Jewish girl in my class. She had this attitude that she knew she was Jewish, but most of her friends were not. So what happens is comes to the age of 13 and start thinking about bat mitzvah. And both Renee and Roger kept telling her, you don't have to if you don't want to. I mean, that's okay. You can go to Sunday school, you can learn everything. You don't have to have a bar mitzvah. Yeah, I think I want to have a bar mitzvah. She did, but not with temple. They had she had a teacher who was, I think, not a rabbi, but he worked all the synagogues, and he taught Hebrew. And she learned Hebrew in 1 year, sang and read from the Torah in her home. That's where they wanted to be, not a temple. They had this beautiful home, and they felt that they just wanted their friends. They didn't want thousands of people around. And that's what they had. So it was an interesting deed on her part, you know, to just insist on having a bat mitzvah, even though she was not pressured into it like so many others. She did a great job, just beautiful job. In fact, I'll let you take a look at this little book. That's her bat mitzvah. And she understands she's Jewish. I mean, there's no if and buts about it. But she does have many friends who are not Jewish, and some friends who are. But it never was a question of whether they're Jewish or not. She's a friend is a friend.
Let's go back to your husband. What did he do after?
We've got 3 minutes on the tape.
Okay.
I could switch at this point.
What did Fred do?
You want to switch now?
Yeah,
so
we
we can
switch
get
now.
some.
Shall I wait? You asked me about my husband, who had a very interesting life. He was in World War II as an assistant to General Bradley. Names.
Omar Bradley, right? Is it Omar Bradley?
I don't remember whether it was Bradford or Bradley. It's something that I don't recall, so you don't have to mention that if you want to edit it. But he finished as a major and was recommended to Joe Schwartz, who was the director of the Joint Distribution Committee in Paris. And that's how he ended
That's how
up
he
there.
got to Bulgaria.
Yes. So he was of course, in France for a couple of years, still working at that office, and then he came to Bulgaria and finished his job here, and then went to school again, as I said before, and he got the job for AJC, which was very dear to his, to his thinking. And really and truly met some of the most interesting people of Dallas at the time, who were mostly Reform Jews. There were not too many of the Orthodox Jews who were interested in the American Jewish community, which was pro-Israel. So that was a sort of a division among the people he had as members. And so he stayed with the committee, with the Jewish committee, I think, for about almost 6 years, 6 or 7 years in Dallas. And of course, we met the best to the best and had a wonderful time. And when it came time to that he was sort of transferred, if he wished to, I was the one who made him. He would not have. He was perfectly happy with what he was doing right here. But I said we'll probably never have an opportunity like that to live for 2 years and still be working for the same organization. And he was reluctant, but I did insist, so we did. And so when he finished that, he wanted to come back and go to school again. That was his, he could have been a continuous student, forever and ever. So he graduated from the University of Chicago with his degree, and of course could not be a social worker per se. He was mostly into the organization. That's how he got his job, and after he went to school in Dallas. And after that, after I opened the gallery, he had just retired, and he said that he wanted to open a framing shop so that he could help with the gallery, do the framing. And he knew nothing about framing, but you know how it just is. I knew nothing about marble, but it was like an interest, that he had. And so before you knew it, he had Frame Masters, which is still in existence today. That's at Allen Park. So he owned that place for maybe 10 years or so, and then sold it to one of his workers, who still has it, and with whom we were still very much in touch. Then he retired completely, and was lucky to see his granddaughter, but he started with Alzheimer's maybe 5 years in December since he died, and he started about 5 years before. So he was here very comfortable, and we had some help, very little, it was mostly me, but his life was very, he did so much for so many people.
Yes, he did.
Through his life, I think that was his tremendous accomplishment, and he was a Jew to the core, but not the kind of Jew, who would be in anybody's face. I mean, he did whatever he did was done very subtly. All the help and all the his activities were very subtle and very well appreciated by a lot of the Jewish organizations, as well as Temple, and his friends of all the rabbis.
And how do you think Dallas has changed since you came to live here?
In any particular way, or just in general?
Just anything that you've observed?
It's grown.
Yes.
It's grown, and I don't mean just physically. It's grown culturally. It's grown. It's a city where you can do things. It's not a desert that it used to be. It truly were a desert. There's nothing around it that's attractive to go to. Where could you go, like, for an hour if you drove? No place. No, there's the lakes and whatnot, and all these things, man-made lakes, and so there was just a little more nature. And but as far as the people, it was a quiet life, much quieter life in those days. We had, we lived, we had a life. I'm noticing that our kids don't have a life. They're so busy with work and doing and running for the kids and whatnot. Can't live your child outside for a minute alone these days. My kids walked to school, or they rode a bicycle, or they were on a horse, nobody, Mom, can I go with Marnie? Yes. She goes, gets on a horse, and they go. And I never looked for them. They knew what they had to come back. It was a different life. From that viewpoint, it has changed so much that I feel for the young people today who don't have a minute to themselves. They're involved with work, or with children, or with carpooling, or with all the activities back and forth. So life is not exactly what I would call as easy and happy as it was.
And who are your role models?
Ruth Kahn was one of them. I think she started the Jewish Historical Society.
Correct.
And she was a good friend, and I loved her dearly. She was a role model without any thought I could name her as the first one. Jerry Beer was my dearest friend, and also role model. I think she taught me more about life than I had ever learned, because I never had the opportunity of learning about life and social work, and social life and social work, and help, and doing things for others. I didn't have time to be educated in this respect, so I came as a child, and she just took me under her wing, and so I consider her, and many others. God, I can't even. But primarily, I would say Ruth Kahn and Jerry Beer, and Bob Beer, of course, were the people who took me under their wing when we first came to Dallas. Those are the first people we met, and those same people, the Wolfords and the Sangers, and all of these were our friends until they passed away. So it's the richness of the friends we had, the Jewish community, and mostly Jewish friends. And I did not start acquiring non-Jewish friends until I stepped out of my gallery. So so I had the pleasure of having both sides. My Jewish friends who were very, very important to me and to my children and to our life as productive, interested people in the way of life of both Jews and non-Jews in a growing community like Dallas, which was just like we were, totally inexperienced and unsophisticated. And things have changed.
Yes, they have. Can we look at some of the
Oh, yes, and I'd
paintings
love
that you
to
have?
give you the story of some
Okay,
of the pieces
yes.
because they have such a meaning to me.
Let me pause it for just a minute.
Would you like to start?
Oh, right here, I think right here. This is, I don't know how many people knew that I am an artist as well. So some of this work is mine. Most of the sculptures are mine. All of these sculptures you see, these are all, again, I made with my own little hands.
Here, maybe.
And bronze and aluminum. And let's see, there's some more over there, and there's wax and whatnot. So those are all pieces which I made when I was, that's before I had the gallery, when I had some time to do stuff like that. And I did a lot of painting, entered a lot of exhibitions and received a lot of awards, but that's just part of the life that I wanted. And I had to taste it all before I could get involved with others and teaching others. So,
How did you do those as well?
no, those are two sculptors who, one was a teacher of mine at Brookhaven, because I went to Brookhaven. That's Rick Maxwell, the living one. And then both of them actually. And the plants are God's plants. But they live so well in my house. To believe that this ponytail is over 60 years old.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, and I've had it
Beautiful.
for about 50. It just keeps growing. And so this one my son brought. This tiny little plant from Austin one day. It just grew and grew and grew. And it's still growing. And there's my puppy, the nicest puppy in the world. It doesn't do anything.
Easy to take care of, right?
Very.
Doesn't
very.
even shed. Doesn't even shed on the
Doesn't
furniture.
shed, and I still talk to him. Let's see, what else? These are all artists who were in my gallery. So everyone was represented in my gallery in a big way. They were all important artists. And the same thing here, all these except for Henry Moore. That's a print that I bought when I had the print gallery. And it's one of my favorite pieces by him. But everything else is made by Texas artists. And so,
Do you have any of your son's photographs?
yes, I do. In fact, one of them is just coming back from from Frame Masters where it's being framed, but I do have some of him as well. And these are some clay pieces which I did after my husband died. It was just like finding myself just folding in and sort of putting things together, tying them together. It just came out as such an unusual, kind of a effect that, life had on me with art, and I presented it so differently from what I used to do before. This was made, this was one of my artists. I had this little curio, which I was going to throw away, and then I wondered where would I put my box collection, and I have over 150 boxes anymore. And so I gave her this and she redid and remade all of this. Did you want to move someplace else?
The cord was stuck,
No.
so we'll just make people ill.
So this is Pamela Nelson. Yes, she made this for me, and of course all my boxes have meaning because each one was either given
I
to
love
me
the
or
color.
I bought it whenever we went someplace. And she's the same artist that did this piece that you like so much. Yeah, and let's see, here's some more artists in my gallery. Now, this is me. I've done these also. This is like a different period in my art life. You know, it was just like a revelation, just a totally different perspective on art, and all has to do with my own feelings, you know, with the fact that that was unfolding or whatever. And I did this one too, which is wax, and this one, which is aluminum. That's from an older era. That was done in the 70s, I believe. And it's called Cheerleader. And what I have to show you is my little gallery in the kitchen.
I'll switch to battery, right? Okay, I've turned it off.
Okay, we're all set.